Finally, a game has released that basically nobody likes, so I'm free to crap all over it to my heart's content without fear of fan backlash. However, that being said, I'm not going to waste over 30 minutes breaking down every individual flaw with this game. After a certain point, you're just beating a dead horse. I think we all knew this thing would be mediocre at best. And 8 hours of this game was pretty much all I could stand. So this is basically going to be just an impressions video, except there's never going to be a full review, cause why the hell would I waste my time playing this? Much like how Final Fantasy Versus 13 eventually became Final Fantasy 15 after like 10 years of development hell. This was originally a tech demo called Agni's Philosophy that for one reason or another also has become a game, and while I did never end up playing Final Fantasy 15, I can be fairly confident it wasn't as bad as this. So let's just begin with the concept. You play as Frey, a young black woman who has committed multiple felonies.
You have 2 previous felony thefts, and with this new one, your grand total will be 3. This could put you away for a very, very long time. You have so much
potential. I can do so much more with my life. I'm a smart girl with a bright future.
I was going to say you have so much anger and resentment in you, I'm not sure you'll ever amount to anything at all.
You tell her. Tell her, sister. Really not a good start. There's a lot of weird, kinda unintentional racism that you're gonna notice here. And instead of being sent to prison, is given 120 hours of community service. As she leaves the courthouse, some woman drops her phone, and Frey is a nice girl who didn't do nothing, so she picks up the phone and gives it to the woman to show us she has a heart of gold deep down. And as we're finally given control of the game, you're gonna notice the game runs like absolute shit. I actually have a pretty powerful gaming PC now that more than meets the system requirements, but even on a 3080, I couldn't run this thing on medium-high settings without stuttering every few seconds. I've heard a lot of reports of performance issues from other people, but at least on medium with a $2,500 computer, you might be able to run this thing at 60 FPS. Soon, Frey gets pulled off the streets by some gang that she was stealing a car for, which is how she got arrested again in the first place, and we get some really shitty dialogue.
Hey, Lisa? Lisa? Really? I thought she was Lisa.
That's Chrissy!
Oh my god.
Our boss, Mr. Gigan, is very unhappy. So unless you get it back, one of us is gonna be in a lot of pain.
Do I get to pick?
We will leave your body in this fucking alley, and I promise you, no one is gonna miss you.
Do it. End our suffering. Do I get a Far Cry style ending? Where I can be like, fuck you, bitch, and then she blows my head off. That'd be excellent.
Gigan!
Alright, Gigan. Quick, Gig. I just tell him. I need some more time.
Yeah, you better get used to writing like that. It's all over this game. And she unironically gets out of this jam by throwing pocket sand. And apparently she's like a parkour badass. And the female goon completely forgot she has a gun and could just shoot her. And so Frey gets away to her apartment. And of course she lives in a shithole, and she's been committing all of these larceny crimes to save up enough money to move out of the city. You'll notice more cartoonish writing in this scene, like the fact that she loves Alice in Wonderland, the original isekai. There's a couple more stereotypes, like the fact that she owns expensive sneakers, putting them on their own shelf, and that she's an abandoned orphan, literally left under a bridge. Now, I would argue being raised by a single mother would probably be more appropriately racist, but I think this still counts. So she finally goes to bed, and as she wakes up, her apartment is burning down, and instead of grabbing the fucking money she saved up, which I tried to do, by the way, that was the first thing I clicked on, she goes for her cat first, the money burns, and so she has to give her cat to the judge, as she's the only person that Frey is close to. In the next scene, she climbs to the top of the Holland Tunnel sign, where she was left as a baby, and possibly contemplates suicide, though I'm not sure if that's what the developers intended. It kind of feels that way, and I made a pretty inappropriate joke here. I was about to say, plot twist, this whole game takes place in her head as she jumps off the building to kill herself. That's probably a little too dark for some people, but that's what I like. That's my sense of humor. She conveniently then spies a weird glowy light inside a nearby building, goes to check it out, and finds an ornate gilded vambrace, which opens a magical portal to a fantasy realm. And of course, the vambrace talks, and she calls it Cuff, even though he literally says he's a vambrace, call me vambrace. And Cuff is another generic, deep voice, British, pompous, kind of pessimist character who has snarky lines to counterphrase overconfidence. There's not really any more depth to it than that. They work off each other okay, I guess, but neither one of them is particularly likable. That being said, I was already finding it hard to pay attention at this point, not just because of excessive cutscenes, of which there are many. Especially in the first few hours, the game stops you every 10 feet to give you some other boring, worthless cutscene with bad dialogue, really bad facial animations. That's another thing you're gonna notice. Not only is the quality of the models pretty poor, we're talking like PS3 level. I mean, just look at this footage. But even the facial animations are not lip-synced properly, or at least not super accurately, to the point where people ask me if this was dubbed over. It's just that poorly done, dude.
We're saved.
What the fuck is that face? So here we have the introductory quest that's supposed to grip you. You're given a few tutorials of how the combat mechanics work. It takes a little bit too long for them to give you every ability. You don't even get to dodge until like the 4th fight. And it ends with you fighting a big dragon. The boss fight is way too long, has way too much health, especially given that basically all you can do is shoot rocks. In fact, for the entire playtime, even if it was only 5 hours, it was basically just infamous Second Son gameplay, but with far less skill or any of the more interesting elements. To sort of broadly cover how the combat plays out, like I said, it's much like infamous Second Son. You hold R2 to shoot whatever slightly different brand of rocks that you have equipped. One of them's a rapid fire one of them you can charge to shoot a big rock. Another one you hold down to create a shield, which you can shoot as a rock. But you're just going to use the rapid fire one for pretty much your entire playtime, or at least I did. The more interesting half of your magic skills are the support skills, which are all on a recharge timer. You use them once, then switch to the next one, then switch to the next one. If for whatever dumb reason you decide to play this, I would highly recommend going into the settings and turning on the combat setting that has you auto switch which support spell you have equipped as soon as one is on cooldown. That will save having to hold L1 every 2 seconds. The support skill abilities range from shooting a leech seed, which sucks their health over time, a wide range melee vine that hits everyone around you, a little turret that can shoot enemies for a few seconds. The only 2 cool ones were holding the enemies in place and setting down a rock trap that explodes in a huge explosion radius. You also have this magical parkour system where if you hold circle, it'll auto vault over ledges and climb walls. And of course, you also have a dodge mechanic as well. But much like Callisto Protocol, if you hold down circle, the game will auto dodge for you. Cuff can also block attacks automatically, but only as long as your little square stamina bar has bars, and dashing also takes up bars. On top of this, purple and red attacks can't be blocked, and red attacks specifically can't be dodged, or at least not auto-dodged. You have to be out of the way of the hitbox. So basically what this means is there's almost no point to the auto block. I mean, it comes up sometimes against weak enemies, but against any enemy that's a challenge, they just go through your block anyway. And I gotta say, this whole auto parkour system kinda controls like shit for combat, and it's hard to explain unless you're actually playing the game, but basically your dodge is like a canned contextual animation. Even though it's automatic, much like Callisto Protocol, if you're in the middle of a dodge, you're locked into that animation, and so when the invincibility frames run out, you can just be hit. And so if you accidentally trigger the dodge and a red attack is about to come up, you're basically going to be hit no matter what. So the controls are a little bit sloppy. Not to mention, as you get a little bit further into the game, the enemies just have way too much health in general. There's nothing fun about spamming little baby pebbles against zombies over and over again. Yes, the support spells do a lot of damage, but Then you have a different problem where it's kind of like God of War Ragnarok, where you're just spamming runic attacks, or in this game's case, the support spells, over and over again to quickly dispatch of minor enemies as fast as possible. That is definitely not complex combat by any stretch. Now, if you played the demo, which again, you'd have to be insane to do that, but I did, in the demo, they gave you the second elemental power from the beginning, so combat felt quite a bit better because you had twice as many spells to scroll through. In this version, you don't fight the first major boss in the first 5 hours, and so I was stuck with just throwing rocks for 5 hours straight, with very little variation in how you fight specific enemies. I mean, yeah, some bosses have some different attack patterns, some have like wide area of effect stuff, some of the basic enemies will have status ailments or something, but at the end of the day, they're all bullet sponges. And I can't forget to mention the combat quips, and yes, I know, you can turn them off, but I have to just show you a short clip of what happens when you turn it up to max. It's so bad, it's good.
Can you just not? Let me in. That's it. You ready? This is gonna sting. Ah. Yup. Okay. Nope, not working.
Now, roughly 7 hours into the game, you'll finally face the first major boss, and once you defeat her, you'll get access to fire powers. And thankfully, unlike your rocks, they're actually a melee ability. You're basically making a fire sword, and much like your rock powers, the fire powers also have their own set of support skills. There's a lot of good ideas here. The problem is, at the end of the day, it doesn't actually change combat all that much. Now, of course, in melee, you're much more at risk to taking damage, and given the nature of the combat, that makes it much harder to auto-dodge things because you can't interrupt your attack animations with dodges. So that's a pretty good trade-off for a slightly more satisfying combat skill set. That being said, the automated nature of the combat ruins a lot of skill it would otherwise have. Because the dodging is automated, you're already going to lose the attention of all Souls fans. And the only other type of dodging besides holding circle is still just holding circle, but you have to evade the hitbox of the attack, which is often just circling behind an enemy. Or in some cases, you're forced to hide behind cover in the arena. That's pretty much it. And like I already said, the enemies just have too much fucking health, man. I don't know how so many modern games have screwed this up, but if an enemy takes more than like 5 or 6 hits, and we're talking basic enemy types that you fight hundreds of, you need to go back to the drawing board. There's no reason a basic enemy type should take more than 2 or 3 hits on normal difficulty, especially when you're fighting a bunch at the same time. So this combat system is just kind of mediocre. It's not terrible, it's probably the best part of the game, but it needed to be tweaked. As it stands, it's just way too repetitive, there's not enough enemy variety, and the boss fights just don't stand out. And so we've established the combat's kind of mediocre, and given the intro, you can probably guess the story and the writing are pretty mediocre, but I might as well dive back into that for a second, as I haven't even explained what your purpose here is. So Frey, for whatever reason, is another reluctant protagonist. I'm getting really sick of those. Even though her life was objectively shit in the real world, she still wants to go home, maybe because she really misses her cat, I don't know, I wasn't even paying attention at this point. But now, in this world, she has magical powers and is a super badass, and is killing all these evil monsters and stuff. Why the hell would you want to go back to your old life if your life here is just so much cooler? So eventually you discover this surviving human village, and you find out that like 90% of the world has been consumed by this mysterious break virus that turns people into zombies or hideous monsters. And the world is like a series of mini monarchies ruled by various queens who are all these super powerful witches, and obviously they're the main villains. And look, I already know what you're thinking, but isn't that just low-hanging fruit? I think it's pretty obvious that this is like a female power fantasy type of game, and when this game eventually bombs, I think it'll prove that this sort of thing will not sell in the game industry, no matter how much you want to pretend that 50% of all gamers are women, or whatever the newest study has claimed. So yeah, the fact that it's so obvious, but kind of done in a weirdly politically neutral way anyway. It's not like they're beating you over the head with the fact that, you know, women are awesome and they're the only heroes of this world or something. At least I didn't see that explicitly being said. That doesn't mean it's not there, because of course it is there. Of course it is woke. But I find it really hard to actually get angry about this just because no one gives a flying fuck about this game. Let's be real. This game is not going to change anything. It's not like a Sony exclusive that we have to all pretend is a masterpiece because some losers on the internet said so. So yeah, honestly, I don't even really fucking care that every major character is a woman in this. And as a side note, Deborah Wilson is in this game. I don't know how she ends up in like half of modern games. It's really weird. Is she one of the leaders of the voice actor mafia or something? And it's not even just her voice, it's specifically her likeness. Someone please explain this. I'm genuinely curious. And man, this is another one of those games, just like Horizon Forbidden West, where everyone is ugly. And I just don't know why. It has to be intentional. BlackRock had to have funded this game, dude. Which I don't know how the hell they end up spending like $150 million or whatever it is. This game sure doesn't look it. It's gotta be all those years in development hell as a glorified tech demo. And there's also a part where there's like a morbidly obese librarian woman who just looks horrible. How the hell are there even obese poor people in medieval times? That's not how it fucking works, guys. The only people who could afford to be fat were the rich. And don't give me the fantasy excuse. It's not like they fucking had high fructose corn syrup and everything, and seed oils, and all these other fillers. And it's weird that given the quirky nature of the dialogue, that millennial Reddit humor stuff, I don't know why they keep making Frey unlikable in various moments. She's mean to Cuff all the time, she straight up steals an apple from this cart without paying for it. And while she does end up giving it to a little black girl, I guess who's an orphan just like her that she finds, then I just start asking questions about this fantasy world, about why there's so many diverse different people, and maybe there's an explanation for it in the game. I really don't know. But it's just another thing that's distracting. And the little girl dies like 30 minutes later, by the way. And obviously we're supposed to feel sad at this scene, but this whole game has this weird layer of uncanniness where I just can't relate to any of the human characters. And of course, I can't forget to talk about the Ubisoft-style open world with various repetitive activities like going to a tower. At least you don't climb the tower, which they make a stupid joke about.
Frey, would you mind going and taking a closer look at that tower?
Sure.
I think it might help us get a better sense of our surroundings.
You don't expect me to climb that, do you?
Or going to a set of ruins and killing a wave of enemies, or going into some weird copy-paste dungeon where you kill a bunch of enemies, or going to a fort where you kill a bunch of enemies, which honestly on its own wouldn't be bad, but like I said, the combat's just kind of repetitive and simplistic, at least in the first 5 hours, and there was only like 5 or 6 enemy types over the course of my short playtime, not including the mini-bosses, which the mini-bosses at least were mostly different. There's also some light RPG elements, like almost every modern sandbox or open world AAA game, which are okay, I guess. You find these little mana pools or you level up, and this raises your total mana, which lets you unlock new spells to cast. There's 2 types of gear, that being your cape and your necklace, which give you tiny buffs, almost inconsequential buffs. You can paint your nails to give you another buff, which just sounds parody tier, dude. A woman has to paint her nails to increase her magical abilities. Slay. Slay, queen! Are you serious? Come on! And to briefly touch on the UI as well, look at this gross fisheye lens that is warping all the text, and it just looks gross to me, dude. I can sort of applaud them for not going for like the modern AAA Destiny copycat menus, which all look awful, absolutely awful, but this also is just as bad, I would say. So finally, after suffering through the open world for a few hours, I decided to just bum rush my way to the first castle so I would get access to more powers, and I was treated to easily the worst cutscene in the game so far.
I am the one you seek. The one and only Tanta Sila.
So,
face to face with the kitty killer herself.
There will always be casualties in war.
Great. No war, no casualties. Sounds good to me.
Simple-minded. Silly girl.
War is bad, guys. We just shouldn't wage war.
The hell?
What a lesson. What a moral. How deep.
How you
And the boss fight was nothing to write home about either. After you kill the queen, Frey gets all sad about finally killing an actual human being. And man, I just can't muster a single fuck to give. And I was happy I finally had these new abilities, but like I said earlier, it just couldn't hold my attention, so I tried to watch a little bit more of the story for maybe something interesting to happen. And the human village all celebrates the death of the evil witch, which of course is set up for the next evil witch to attack the town and turn a bunch of people into zombies. And the game was running like absolute shit at this point, so I was just demoralized, and I couldn't take it anymore. So I quit the game and played Dark Souls 2 of all things to end the most recent stream. And look, there's a part of me that wants to get more upset about this game, but it's hard to because I knew how bad it would be from the first trailer. So at a certain point, I'm just feigning outrage when in truth, I knew this would be a garbage game. I knew it would be woke. I knew the combat would probably suck based on the demo. Though I never would have guessed that it would take more than 5 hours just to get your second power skill set, especially when shooting rocks gets boring after like 1 hour. So there's not really any point in dwelling on this game's various minor flaws. You already know all the big ones, and you could probably guess a lot of the minor ones as well. And Dead Space Remake is about to come out, so I have to crap out this video anyway, and I don't think any of you care that I didn't put that much effort into this one. This game doesn't deserve the attention, and it is no doubt a great early candidate for worst game of the year.
Wow. She's beautiful.
Yes. She does possess a certain aesthetic appeal.
No, I mean, like, from the inside.
I think Cup is
Shines
a based gay
She was
bro.
the tons
He's
of
one of those
love.
gay dudes who hates women.
Those eyes.
It's just,
So
I'm
kind.
getting those vibes. Why is her?
So comforting.
Is that supposed to be signifying I was on low health? That she just had shit smeared all over her face? Like, I'm trying not to point it out, but I just can't.